I've been asked today to talk about how to work with interpreters, or issues that evolve when you're working with interpreters. And I'd say that there are 3 stages that you should be aware of when you're working with an interpreter. It's prior to working in the field, during the work in the field, and after working in the field. So first of all, let's look at prior to working in the field. I think it's very important that you build up a relationship with the person you're going to be working with. Building up a relationship so they know the purpose for your work, they know where you're coming from, they're also getting exposure to the language that you're using, and you're able to work on their level of language and how they are going to be interacting with you during the interviews or during the fieldwork, and the types of maybe nuanced understanding that you will need with regard to their ability to use the language that you're working in. So it's very important to spend time to learn about each other, to learn about their background as well as for them to understand your background, to learn about the way they use English and the way that you're using English. It's also very important to build up their background knowledge about the research that you're undertaking. So you'll find that things will be far more fruitful in the field if they've got a deeper understanding of the purpose of your research and of the reasons why you're doing your research. This might take a fair bit of time. It's really great if you can extend the time prior to going to the field and getting to know your interpreter, so that you have a lot of different opportunities in different locations to understand each other. So that is just briefly about the importance of building up the relationship, the linguistic relationship as well as the cultural relationship with your interpreter. The second thing is during the fieldwork and working with the interpreter. I've worked with many different kinds of interpreters. I've worked with people in Australia and overseas, sometimes knowing a little bit of the language that I'm working in, sometimes knowing none of the language, sometimes being fluent in the second language but still wanting to use an interpreter because of the context of where I'm using the language and not feeling that confident. So throughout that experience I've realised that it's always important to be aware of your own language. First of all, the speed at which you're speaking. So it's always a good idea to just slow down. I tend to be a fast talker anyway, but sometimes when you're in the field you just think it's normal and everybody's speaking your language, so therefore they're understanding it, not necessarily. So slow your language down. Also avoid using jargon. Be very aware of the terminology that you're using. Be very specific. Don't imagine that people are going to be understanding and interpreting everything you're saying and emphasising it the way you want it to be emphasised. So take time in the field to speak slowly, to speak clearly, and to try to avoid using those terms that might have ambiguity around them. If you can see that the interpreter that you're working with is having trouble or is being asked lots of questions about what you're saying, then maybe it's time to just stop that whole process of the interpreting and just talk directly to the interpreter, to clarify, to check, to get them to explain to you what they're understanding about what you're asking them to explain to others. So this is important. So sometimes actually the conversation might turn away from the people that you're working with to just talking with the interpreter, so to gain that, so that clear communication happens. And then thirdly, I'd be saying after the fieldwork happens, it's really great if you can embed time and organise time for paid work to happen, so that both the interpreter and yourself can listen to the recording of the interviews, if you are recording it, or even to go over notes. If you can't record it, then to just read through field notes so that you can check. Ideally you're recording the interviews or the interpreting work, but so that you can listen to it, both of you together, so that when you're transcribing it, you are able to check with the interpreter, is that what was really asked? Is that what was really said? And sometimes if you've got a good, open, honest relationship with the interpreter, they'll be saying, well, actually I misunderstood you. And it's that post-interview stage where you can see clarification happening, and you'll know what to go into the field next time to ask. You'll know that sometimes maybe you thought things were being asked, but maybe it was a slightly different thing that was being interpreted and found out. So, and sometimes that's not a problem, because sometimes that might be quite interesting as well. So therefore you're working as a team together to pursue the aim together. So it should be really, going back to the beginning of what I started to say, a collaborative venture. So if you've started off correctly in the first place, explaining the purpose, working with the interpreter to start off to find out if this is possible, then you can come back to that right at the very end and check that that's been achieved. Thanks.